Get out of the way, mutt, before you get yourself killed. Officer Theo Ramirez slammed the brakes as the German Shepherd darted into the middle of the snowy road, forcing his cruiser to skid sideways. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as the tires crunched to a halt just inches from the dog's chest. Heart pounding, Theo stared through the windshield, expecting the dog to bolt like most strays would. But this one didn't move. He just stood there, his thick coat dusted with snow, his eyes fixed on the cruiser like he was daring it to come closer. Theo threw the door open, stepping into the icy wind that sliced through his uniform. "What the hell is your problem?" "Huh?" he muttered, gripping the doorframe. But as soon as he took a step forward, the dog barked. A sharp, commanding bark that didn't match the behavior of a scared animal. It wasn't panic, it was urgency. The dog took 3 steps back, looked over his shoulder, and barked again. Then he turned and ran. Theo hesitated. Every instinct told him to ignore it. He had a call pending. A stranded vehicle reported 5 miles down this snowy stretch of Highway 12, and he didn't have time to chase after a rogue dog. But something about those eyes unsettled him. Not fear, not aggression, just desperation. With a frustrated sigh, he radioed dispatch. "Unit 37, detouring off 12 near mile marker 48, following a stray dog. Might be nothing, but it's acting strange." Dispatch responded with a confused, "Copy that," and Theo followed on foot. The snow was thick, making every step heavier. The shepherd stayed just ahead, glancing back every few seconds to make sure the officer was still coming. They veered off the road, through a break in the guardrail, and into a shallow gully, blanketed in white. Branches cracked underfoot. Cold bit into Theo's cheeks, but the dog didn't slow. He led Theo through a small patch of trees and into a ditch lined with frozen brush. That's when he saw it, a flipped vehicle, almost entirely buried in snow, tilted against a tree with its passenger side crumpled like paper. Smoke still drifted, faintly from the hood. The windshield was shattered, the license plate barely visible. Theo's heart kicked into overdrive. He stumbled forward, grabbing his radio. "This is Ramirez. Vehicle located off-road near mile 48. 180 flipped and partially buried. Possible occupants inside. I need backup and EMTs now." He raced to the driver's side, slipping on the ice. The dog was already there, pawing frantically at the broken window. Inside, Theo could just barely make out a hand, small, unmoving, a child's hand. Damn it. He dropped to his knees, clearing the snow with his gloved hands. "Hey, can you hear me? Are you awake?" No response. The dog growled low, pacing in tight circles, then stopped to bite and pull at the door handle with his teeth, like he was trying to rip it off. Theo yanked his crowbar from the cruiser's kit and jammed it into the crevice of the door. "Hang on, kid," he muttered, sweat running down his neck despite the cold. "Hang on." It took everything he had, but the door finally groaned open just enough to peer inside. The front seat was crumpled. The woman in the driver's seat wasn't moving. Blood covered the dashboard. But in the back, wedged between a car seat and a blanket, was a boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, his face pale, lips slightly blue, still breathing. Barely. Theo crawled in. "I've got you, buddy. Don't move." The boy stirred, blinking slowly. Milo." Theo glanced back at the shepherd. The dog's ears perked up at the name. "You know this dog?" Theo asked, lifting the boy gently. The child nodded weakly. "Milo saved me." Theo wrapped him in the emergency blanket from his pack, carried him out into the clearing, and radioed again. "I've got a live child, 7 years old, hypothermia likely, breathing, conscious. I need that ambulance now." Sirens were coming. Fast. He could hear them echoing faintly through the trees. The dog, Milo, followed closely, never once leaving the boy's side. When Theo tried to back away, the shepherd nudged closer, pressing his body against the boy like a heated shield. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stayed there, like he had made a promise and wasn't going to break it. Theo crouched, beside them, breath misting in the air. "You're not just some stray, are you?" Milo didn't respond, but his eyes said it all. This wasn't random. This was loyalty. This was love, and it had just saved a life. The ambulance lights painted the snow in pulses of red and white as EMTs rushed into the clearing, their boots crunching over ice-crusted brush. Officer Theo Ramirez backed away as the medics surrounded the boy, carefully wrapping him in thermal blankets, checking his pulse, murmuring clipped updates into radios. But it wasn't the urgency of their movement that caught Theo's attention. It was Milo, the German shepherd, who refused to move from the boy's side. Every time a medic reached in to check vitals or lift the child onto a stretcher, Milo growled. Not aggressively, but with a low, warning rumble that made everyone pause. Theo stepped forward, crouching beside the dog and resting a hand gently on his shoulder. "It's okay, boy. They're here to help him." Milo turned his head just enough to look at Theo, and for a second, there was a flicker of trust in those amber eyes. The growl stopped. Milo stepped aside. The boy's name was Owen. The paramedics had found an ID bracelet on his wrist, half tucked, under his coat. One of the medics handed it to Theo. No last name, but he's stabilized, still cold, but responsive. We got lucky. Theo looked toward the crumpled car. The woman in the front seat hadn't made it. He'd already covered her body with a thermal sheet, her face peaceful now beneath the frost. He didn't know if she was Owen's mother, a relative, or just someone trying to get him to safety. All he knew was the boy had survived because of that dog. Milo stood beside the stretcher as the EMTs loaded Owen into the back of the ambulance. He barked once, short, soft, and tried to jump in behind him, but one of the medics blocked the door. "Sorry, no animals." Theo didn't think. "He's not just an animal. He's the reason that kid's alive. He's coming with us." The Kai medic frowned, ready to argue, but Theo flashed his badge with just enough force to make the decision stick. Milo hopped into the ambulance and curled at Owen's feet without hesitation. The boy, barely conscious, reached out and touched Milo's ear with a trembling hand. Milo didn't move. He just stared at the child, refusing to blink, like it was his job to hold back death with nothing but sheer will. At the hospital, the staff scrambled to make sense of the arrival. A half-frozen child, a mystery accident, and a dog that acted more like a trained officer than a stray. But the mystery only deepened when Theo ran the plate number from the wrecked car. It wasn't in the system, not as stolen, not registered, nothing, like it had never existed. And when he checked Owen's ID bracelet, there were no matches in, missing persons, no open Amber alerts, no records of a child by that name in any local database. He stood at the end of the hospital hallway, watching through the glass as Owen rested under warm blankets, IVs snaking into his arms, his tiny frame, rising and falling with each shallow breath. Milo sat on the floor beside the bed, alert and still as if he were standing watch. Theo's phone rang. It was dispatch. "We got something strange," the voice on the other end said. "You know that dog you brought in, Milo?" "Yeah. Well, we ran a scan on his microchip. He's not just some stray. He's registered under a military handler. Retired. Name was Sergeant Carter Wynn. Died 2 years ago. The file says Milo went missing the night of his funeral. Vanished. They assumed he ran off." Theo's throat went dry. "You're telling me that dog's a veteran?" "More than that. He was part of a covert handler canine program. Specialized. Rescue and trauma unit. Most of it still classified." Theo hung up slowly, staring at Milo through the glass, questions building in his chest like a rising tide. Why had Milo found Owen? Why lead a police cruiser off-road through the snow? Straight to that wreck? Was it instinct or memory? When he stepped into the room, Milo didn't move. He watched Theo with cautious eyes, his body between the cop and the boy. Theo walked slowly, holding his hands up. "Easy, partner. Not here to take him away." He sat in the chair beside the bed and leaned forward, speaking low, like the dog could understand every word. "You've been trained, haven't you? Someone taught you to protect, to save lives. That kid, he trusts you. But where did you find him? And why were you both out there in the middle of nowhere?" Milo tilted his head, and for a moment, Theo felt a connection. Not just between man and dog, but between purpose and loss. This animal had once belonged to a soldier. That bond, that training, didn't just vanish when the handler died. It stayed. It rooted itself in the dog's bones. Milo wasn't just rescuing a child. He was following something older than instinct, something like a promise. "Do you know where you were going? Who the woman was in the car?" Owen blinked, confused, lips dry. "I don't know. I think she was trying to help me. We were running from bad people." Theo exchanged a glance with Milo, who stiffened as if he understood. Owen's fingers gripped the edge of the blanket. They had trucks, with wires, and they hurt dogs. Theo froze. Something deep inside him twisted. "What do you mean? What kind of place?" Owen's voice was barely audible. "They locked them in cages, hooked them to machines. Milo got me out." Theo stood slowly, mind racing. This wasn't over. Not even close. There was more to that wreck, more to Milo's sudden appearance. And now, a new question burned beneath everything else. What exactly had this dog rescued the boy from? Snow began to fall again outside the hospital windows, slow and soft, coating the parking lot in a blanket of silence. Inside room 208, the air was anything but calm. Officer Theo Ramirez stood at the foot of the hospital bed, one hand on the railing, the other gripping his radio tightly. Owen had fallen back asleep, his tiny hand still resting on Milo's neck. But Theo's thoughts were spiraling. The child's whispered words echoed in his mind like a ticking time bomb. Cages, wires, hurt dogs, that wasn't a fantasy. That wasn't something a child would just imagine in the middle of a traumatic accident. There was something behind those words, something real, something dangerous. And Milo had brought him out of it. Theo stepped into the hallway, his boots heavy against the tile. He needed answers, and he didn't trust anyone else to find them fast enough. With one call, he reached the state police archives. With another, he contacted a retired military liaison who had handled canine decommission files. When he finally got a name to call about the dog's registration, the line clicked and went dead after one ring. No voicemail, no redial option. He stared at the silent phone and felt a chill worse than the snow settle into his chest. Back in the room, a nurse entered to check Owen's vitals. Milo didn't move from his spot, but his eyes stayed locked on the woman's every movement. She made a light comment, something about loyal dogs always being a bit overprotective, but her words barely registered with Theo. His gaze was drawn to the window. A black SUV had just pulled into the far corner of the hospital parking lot. No emergency lights, no insignia, just dark windows and stillness. It didn't move. Theo turned away slowly and walked out of the room, pretending not to notice. Once in the hallway, he moved quickly to the security desk. "I need the surveillance feed for the main entrance and parking lot," he said flatly. The guard hesitated. "You expecting trouble, officer?" "I'm not sure," Theo replied. "That's what I'm here to find out." The monitor flickered as the guard rewound the feed. Theo leaned over and watched as the black SUV appeared on screen. No one exited the vehicle. It just sat there, watching, waiting. Then another feed popped up. From 2 hours earlier. Theo leaned closer, jaw tightening. The wrecked vehicle Owen had been in wasn't the only one that had gone off-road that night. Another had been found in a ravine 2 miles further down the highway, unregistered, burned out. Inside were 3 metal cages, twisted and blackened. One was still latched, shut though the lock had melted. Theo paused the feed and took a breath. Those weren't pet crates. They were reinforced, military grade. What kind of people transported dogs like that through a snowstorm? And more importantly, why had they been destroyed? He turned to the security guard. "Do not let anyone in to see the boy unless I personally clear it. No uniforms, no badges, no excuses." The guard nodded, suddenly pale. Theo rushed back to the room. Owen was still asleep. Milo was up now, standing with his head low, ears twitching. He was pacing. He sensed something. Theo walked to the bed and crouched beside him. "You took him from that truck, didn't you?" he whispered. "You escaped. You got the kid out and you found me. But they're still looking for him. For you." Milo stared at him, then walked to the window and growled low in his throat. Outside, the black SUV was gone. Theo pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Ramirez. I need a vehicle check run on a black unmarked SUV seen near the hospital. Possible surveillance. No plate visible. Check all traffic cams between Highway 12 and St. Agnes Medical. And patch me through to Federal Animal Control." There was a pause. "Did you say Animal Control, officer?" Theo's voice hardened. "Yes, but not for retrieval. For investigation. I think someone's running unauthorized experiments on dogs, military-grade canines, and they're trying to cover their tracks." Back in the room, Owen stirred again. His voice was fragile, but clearer than before. "Are we safe now?" Theo sat beside him and nodded slowly. "You're with people who will protect you now." Owen's eyes moved to Milo. "He never left me, even when the men yelled, even when the wires buzzed. He chewed the cage open. He bit one of them. He pulled me out." Theo felt something twist in his chest. Milo had defied conditioning. He'd risked everything, escaped what had likely been months of trauma, to save a child. That wasn't just instinct. That was something stronger. Memory, guilt, love. There was a knock on the door. A nurse again. But this one wore different shoes. Tactical black boots. Theo stood, hand on his weapon. "Can I help you?" he asked through the door. The man didn't speak. just tilted his head. Milo barked once, short, sharp, and without hesitation. Theo's gut clenched. It was starting again. They'd found them, but this time, he wasn't letting them disappear. Not the boy, not the dog, not the truth. Theo didn't move from the door. His fingers hovered just above his holster, eyes locked on the stranger standing outside Owen's hospital room. The man didn't blink. He stood completely still, expression unreadable, but everything about him felt wrong. Too calm, too polished, too quiet. His hospital badge hung loosely around his neck, but Theo had seen enough counterfeit IDs to recognize one that didn't pass the smell test. The tactical boots, the slight bulge beneath the coat, the way his right shoulder leaned. He was carrying, and not like a cop. "Sorry," Theo said firmly, stepping fully into the doorway to block the view of the room. "Rooms closed to all visitors. Doctor's orders." The man tilted his head slightly and smiled without warmth. "I'm not a visitor. I'm here on federal instruction. You've got something inside that room I need to take into custody." Theo didn't flinch. "You'll need to go through me, and probably a dozen more armed officers once I call in backup. So unless you've got paperwork and a federal warrant in your pocket, I suggest you walk away." The man's smile faded. His eyes flicked past Theo's shoulder, toward the room, just for a split second. Then he turned and walked away, silent as a shadow. But Theo didn't relax, not for 1 second. He followed him to the end of the hallway, watching as he disappeared around the corner. No exit through the lobby, no sign-in at the desk. The sigh. Man had just vanished. Back inside the room, Milo hadn't left Owen's side, but now he stood, ears high, tail stiff. He had sensed it too, the wrongness, the danger. Theo closed the door behind him and locked it. The next 20 minutes passed like slow drips from a leaking faucet. Theo called his captain, explained the situation in quick, clipped sentences. Officially, there was no open investigation on Project K9 reconditioning, because no such project existed in public records. But behind closed doors, whispers had circled for years. Disbanded units, ghost facilities. Dogs that didn't just follow commands. They carried classified memory, trained responses, psychological conditioning that went far beyond obedience. And now one of those dogs was lying at the feet of a 7-year-old boy who was never supposed to be found. Theo leaned against the wall and studied Milo. The way he moved, the way he reacted, the way he never let his eyes stray too far from the window or the door. This wasn't a pet. He was still operating like a soldier, hyper-aware, focused, waiting. The moment of peace didn't last. The lights flickered, only for a second, but enough for every instinct in Theo's body to go cold. He moved to the bedside, crouched beside Owen, and whispered, "Hey, buddy, I need you to stay calm, okay? We might need to leave in a few minutes." Owen blinked sleepily. "Where?" "Someplace safer." Milo stood and moved to the door. Then the sound came, a short, high-frequency whine, barely audible, but Milo staggered. He shook his head hard, whined, and stumbled sideways, legs trembling. "No," Theo growled, stepping forward. "They're using sound again, trying to trigger something." Owen was already crying, sitting upright. "Stop it! You're hurting him!" Theo reached into his pocket and pulled out his handheld radio, yanking the battery out to kill any signal. The sound stopped instantly. Milo slumped, but recovered quickly. His breathing was sharp, panicked. He looked at Theo, confused, scared. Not for himself, but for Owen. "We have to move," Theo muttered, yanking a hoodie from the closet and wrapping it around Owen. "Now." He scooped the boy into his arms. Milo followed, limping slightly but still alert. They made it out of the room just as the hallway lights cut out completely. Emergency backup kicked in seconds later, casting everything in red glow. Theo didn't wait for orders. He took the fire exit stairs, moving fast, descending 3 floors until they hit the parking garage. Most of the staff hadn't noticed the blackout yet, but that wouldn't last. They were being herded. He knew it. Whoever wanted Milo and Owen was closing the perimeter. Just as they reached the lower level, Theo's phone vibrated. One new message, no name. "If you want to keep them alive, don't go back to your cruiser." He looked up, and there it was. His patrol car, parked near the exit ramp. But now a second black SUV sat next to it, engine idling. Milo froze. He started barking, ears flat, teeth bared. He turned sharply and ran toward the opposite end of the garage, toward the maintenance stairwell. Theo didn't hesitate. He ran. After him, Owen still in his arms, heart slamming against his ribs. Milo led them down a tight service corridor, through a utility door, and out into a snow-covered alley behind the hospital. They were out of sight, for now. Theo ducked behind a dumpster, breathing hard, clutching Owen tightly. "We need help," he said aloud, to no one in particular. Then Milo did something strange. He padded toward a metal panel on the wall, pawed at it 3 times, then sat, waiting. Theo squinted. "What the hell are you trying to tell me?" He walked to the panel, reached behind it, and found a small case, taped to the brick. Inside was a thumb drive, and a faded photo of a man in military uniform. Owen gasped. "That's him," he said. "He helped us escape the cages." Theo stared at the photo, then the drive. "You've been leading me to this the whole time, haven't you?" Milo let out a single bark. It wasn't random. It was a signal. The truth was hidden in this drive, and the war for it had already begun. The wind cut like a knife as Theo crouched in the alley, the snow now falling harder, coating their tracks almost as fast as they could leave them. Owen clung to his chest, face buried against his jacket, trembling not just from cold, but from something deeper, fear that never fully let go. Milo stood beside them, still as a statue, eyes fixed on the open street ahead, where shadows passed behind headlights and voices crackled faintly over radios they couldn't see. Theo's hands closed around the small case they'd just recovered, the thumb drive, still warm from the hiding spot behind the panel, and the faded photo of the uniformed man Owen claimed had helped them escape. It was no coincidence. Milo had led them straight to it. This whole time, the dog hadn't just been reacting. He'd been guiding them, remembering what his instincts had once been trained to do, even if every scar on his body suggested someone had tried to break that part of him long ago. Footsteps echoed faintly, not close, but too near to stay hidden for long. Theo turned to Milo and pointed toward a narrow service road that led behind the hospital campus and into the wooded perimeter. "You've done enough, boy, but we need one more miracle. Can you get us out?" Milo didn't bark. He didn't even blink. He turned and took off running, not toward the threat, but away from it, deeper into the darkness, and he never once looked back to check if they were following. Theo ran. They ducked through side streets, through back alleys, past dumpsters and snow-covered benches, the world behind them falling away with every frantic footstep. Somewhere behind, he knew the hospital had entered lockdown. There'd be questions, alarms, radio chatter, but it didn't matter now, because the story was no longer inside those walls. It was in Theo's arms and at his side, a boy who remembered cages and screams, and a dog who'd defied years of trauma just to protect one fragile life. They finally stopped near an old ranger station at the edge of a frozen lake, an abandoned outpost now used only by hikers in the warmer months. It was dark, quiet, and forgotten. Perfect. Theo kicked the door open with one boot and rushed them inside. There was no heat, just a dry floor and walls that would buy them time. He laid Owen on a bench, wrapped him in the emergency blanket he'd taken from the cruiser, then sank down beside Milo. "Okay," he whispered, holding the drive in both hands. "Let's see what you were trying to show me." The small laptop booted slowly, whirring to life as if it hadn't been touched in months. When the files loaded, Theo knew instantly this wasn't just some handler's log or a diary of war stories. It was a blueprint, detailing a classified project called Reclaim. Names, timestamps, locations, and dog IDs. The goal wasn't training, it was reprogramming. They were taking decommissioned K9s, many of them retired after active duty, and testing invasive neurological triggers designed to override years of emotional bonding. The dogs were no longer meant to serve alongside humans. They were being turned into something else, weapons. Milo's file was there. Milo's file was designation K9 R47, notes labeled uncooperative, unresponsive to reconditioning, and finally, escaped facility under unknown circumstances. Theo stared at the line that followed, believed to have assisted in Subject 213's disappearance. Owen. They had labeled the boy as a subject, just a number, just another part of the experiment. Theo shut the laptop with shaking hands. Outside, Milo stood at the door, ears up, tail stiff. Then he growled, not loud, not angry, just a warning. Something was coming. Theo slipped the drive into his pocket, zipped it shut, and moved to the window. In the distance, headlights moved through the trees, slow, scanning. One vehicle, maybe two. "They're still hunting," Theo muttered, grabbing a flashlight and the emergency flare from the ranger station's wall kit. He turned to Owen, who was now sitting up, eyes wide but no longer panicked. "I need you to stay hidden, okay?" I won't let them take you. Owen nodded, but his small voice stopped Theo before he could turn away. If they come, will they hurt Milo? Theo looked at the dog, who now stood tall and silent in front of the door like a sentinel. Not if I can help it. He stepped outside, the cold biting at his face. The cars were close, too close, but the lake just beyond the clearing offered one chance. The surface was frozen solid, surrounded by thick forest. If they could just reach the other side, they could disappear again. Maybe even reach the wildlife cabin 2 miles out where the signal towers went dead. But just as he turned to re-enter the station, the headlights stopped moving. Doors opened. Voices shouted. They had been spotted. Milo didn't wait. He bolted from the cabin, charging toward the noise with speed and purpose. Theo yelled after him, but the dog didn't look back. He wasn't attacking. He was drawing them away. Gunshots cracked the air. Theo didn't hesitate. He grabbed Owen, pressed him close, and ran toward the lake, feet pounding the snow, breath searing his throat. Behind them, Milo's barking turned to silence. They reached the other side by the time Theo heard footsteps again, boots on frozen ground, men yelling, distant but not gone. Owen was safe, but Milo hadn't returned. For hours, Theo waited, by the forest line. He refused to move. He told Owen stories to keep him calm, kept his body warm, stared out into the dark with a flare in hand, hoping, praying, for the sound of padded feet. But nothing came. The next morning, rescue teams found them at the cabin. Theo handed over the drive. He gave his full report. Names were taken. Warrants were issued. A task force formed. But through it all, Theo's mind never left that clearing. Weeks passed. Owen was placed with protective custody under Theo's supervision. The boy barely spoke, except when he asked the same question every night. Do you think Milo is still out there? Theo always gave the same answer. I know he is. And then, one morning, months later, as snow melted and spring softened the world, Owen opened the door to their cabin to find paw prints across the porch. A low bark followed, and there he was, scarred, thinner, eyes tired but still burning with life. Milo had come home, and this time they would never let him go.